Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have Dogman and Bigfoot stories to read to you all today, folks. Let's start off with this article titled, Retired Texas Police Officers' Remarkable Bigfoot Encounters While Bow Hunting, and how about how, he was hunting, folks. He encountered Bigfoot. Let's get into this article and read exactly what this man experienced. Once again, a retired Texas law enforcement officer recalls two unusual encounters that occurred years apart while bow hunting in north central Texas. The first involved eerie screams and stacked stones on a remote Young County ranch in 1991. The second, near Seymour, Texas in 2003, placed the witness within only a few feet of a massive hair-covered humanoid during a violent thunderstorm. Sounds exciting, folks. Let's read his actual account now. I am a 71-year-old retired police officer. During my career, I was trained to observe people, details, and surroundings, then relay those observations as accurately as possible. My first encounter happened in October 1991. A group of friends and I had leased a 4,800-acre ranch in Young County, Texas. I was the only bow hunter in the group, which allowed me to start deer hunting a month earlier than the others. The night before the October 1st bow season opener, I was asleep in my tent when I was awakened around midnight by a loud screaming noise. I heard a series of 3 or 4 evenly spaced screams. It sounded exactly like a woman in distress. At the time, the nearest house was more than 10 miles away. After I calmed down, I tried to make sense of it and eventually, wrote the screams off as a mountain lion. I got up to and at 0300 hours and was in my stand well before daylight. Good for him. But it sounded like something was warning him, folks. It could be that was a mountain lion, but Bigfoot are also known to make screams like this as well. Either way, let's continue. When I climbed into my ladder stand, I found 3 rocks stacked exactly where I would sit. After the morning hunt, I left an apple beside the stacked rocks. I had 5 bow stands on that ranch, so I could hunt according to wind direction. Later, I found 3 stacked stones in all of them. I never heard of those screams again, and I never had any further problems during the next 20 years I hunted that place. The next major encounter happened in 2003. I was hunting on a ranch about 30 miles south of Seymour, Texas in late October. I had gone into my ladder stand well before daylight. The stand was set in timber running along a fence line that bordered a huge mesquite tree flat. Well, that is interesting, folks. For 20 years, he says he had no problems during hunting season. But he says in 2003, well before 20 years passed, folks, he had another encounter with Bigfoot. So let's get back to this particular encounter now. A cold front I had been waiting for arrived about half an hour before daylight. Then an intense thunderstorm broke out. Since the nearest shelter was about 3 miles away, I decided to stay where I was. I had my rain gear on, and it was comfortable enough that I actually fell asleep. I was sitting about 15 feet above the ground when a loud crash of thunder woke me. It came right after a series of lightning bolts that lit up the sky as bright as day. I glanced to my right. Staying no more than 5 feet from me and about 5 feet lower than my position was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. It was very tall, very muscular, human-like creature covered in hair. It stood at least 10 feet tall, and it was covered in light brown to silver hair. It had a huge head set on a massive, powerful shoulders. There appeared to be no neck. It had a heavy brow and a defined human-like nose. So it was less monkey-like and more human-like than a lot of Bigfoot encounters. So that's very interesting. Continuing where I left off, its eyes were deep set with dark rings beneath them. It had heavy dark eyebrows. The whites of its eyes were coffee-colored or bloodshot. The irises were yellowish-green, and the pupils were extremely dilated. Its face was human-like and covered with a full beard, though it had little to or no mustache. Its lips were darker than the skin of its face, and it appeared normal-sized in proportion to the rest of the face. The facial skin was a medium brown. Its arms were longer than a human's arms. It had thick, muscular legs, and I estimate it weighed at least 700 pounds. I have no idea whether it was male or female. When it exhaled, I could see its breath in the cold air. The temperature had just dropped into the mid-30s Fahrenheit. The longer hair on its body was dripping with rainwater. But do you think it was actually cold, folks? You'd think that an animal like this would basically be somewhat immune to actual cold weather, I think, with all the hair. So who knows? But let's continue before we talk any more about this, and then we can discuss it as much as we want. I do not know how long it had been staying there watching me. The odd thing is that I felt no fear. I only felt a sense of wonder at being in the presence of this amazing creature. If it had wanted me, it could have taken my life with no trouble at all. After the next flash of lightning, I looked back in its direction, and it was gone. I never saw it again. Indeed, folks, that is par for the course. It probably ran off as soon as he looked away due to the lightning. That's what I think, folks. Or maybe it was already gone, and it left, some sort of image that the man was actually looking at. Maybe. I don't know. We'll discuss that point later. Let's continue. Eastern Kentucky Dogman encounter. Harlan County grandfather shoots wolf-headed humanoid at his door. Now, as I said, we can talk about that Bigfoot once again, folks, just real quick. Maybe it used some sort of mind trick to make the guy think it was standing there in front of him before it disappeared. Maybe. Either way, let's continue. The following account comes from Bailey's Creek in Halin County, Eastern Kentucky, a region where a mountain folklore, booger stories, haunts, Bigfoot reports, and strange creature encounters are woven deeply into the local tradition. The witness recalls a family story told by his skeptical grandfather, a war veteran and practical mountain man, who rarely entertained tales of ghosts or monsters. What he described was not a bear, not a bobcat, and not a prowler. It was something that came to the family's homestead's front door at night, and according to the grandfather, it returned afterward with a wounded leg. Here's the actual story. I grew up in the small foothills of eastern Kentucky in a place called Bailey's Creek in Halin County. It is the kind of area where folklore, haunt stories, and tales of mountain monsters run rampant. Everyone has a cousin or uncle who claims they saw Bigfoot while hunting, or an aunt who swears she saw a ghost in the old high school one time. Because of that, it can be hard to tell what is true and what is fiction. Most of what I have personally seen or heard while out in the mountains I usually attribute to local wildlife. Have I ever seen anything that my logical mind could not explain? Not yet, but I am also not arrogant enough to think these things do not exist. I once heard someone say that 90% of these stories are fiction, but the other 10% is what keeps you coming back. By that logic, we have to assume that some percentage of the stories are true, and that some people really did witness something amazing and terrifying. In my small town, Dogman is known as the culprit behind many unfortunate happenings. I've heard stories of it killing chickens, trying to bust down doors, attacking hikers, or just being a nuisance on someone's farm or property. I've also heard stories of it stalking people who live deep in the woods, coming up to stare into their windows at night, and even protecting, them from strangers who wandered onto their land. Most of the people who tell these stories like to tell what we call booger stories. They enjoy having a tale to tell, whether for attention or simply for the pleasure of telling it. I am not sure which, but a few of these people are trustworthy, and they usually tell their story only if asked. My grandfather was one of those people. Yes, I know that sounds biased because he was my grandfather, but I have 6 uncles and an aunt who could practically make a living from these lies they tell about local cryptids, and I'm more than happy to call them liars. So it sounds like he trusted the word of his grandfather, folks. That's good. It paints him as, with his particular story here, in a trustworthy light, because his grandson is going to bat for him. That's good. Very good. But let's continue with his story. My grandfather, though, was a very logical man. He was skeptical about cryptids, spirits, ghosts, and anything supernatural. He always looked for the logical explanation, and he usually upset the storyteller by questioning every detail. That is why I tend to believe him. He never tried to lie to me or to other grandkids. If anything, he was the voice of reason we ran to when we were scared. Once I was younger, I asked him if he had ever seen anything strange before, whether it was a ghost or a monster. I had been hearing stories from my uncles all day about Bigfoot, haunts, and other things, and I wanted to know what he thought. He sat there for a minute without ever or even acknowledging my question. I was about to ask again, thinking maybe he had not heard me, when he finally spoke. And what he told, his grandson, was something that basically curdled his toes, I imagine, with this really outlandish tale we're about to hear from his grandson, folks, about how his grandfather encountered a dogman that came to his front door at night. So let's continue. He told me that when he and my grandmother first bought our family homestead, they heard fantastic stories about monsters roaming that part of the mountains and how evil they were. My grandmother was a a little frightened by those stories, but my grandfather said he just shook his head and went on. He figured people were seeing or hearing black bears or maybe bobcats, and he was not too worried about it. About 2 months after they moved in, he did see a mother bear and her cubs making their way up the mountain behind his house. So when he heard something pounding on his front door one night, scratching at it and trying to get in, he did not immediately think of monsters. He told me he grabbed his shotgun before going to the door. He tried looking out the front window to catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever was out there. All he could see was a large black shadow being cast across the porch. But it wasn't the shadow of a black bear, folks, or of even a man. It was something else entirely, wasn't it, Granddad? So I can only imagine how this, story affected his grandkid here, folks. But maybe he'll give us, an idea what he felt after hearing it. But let's continue once again. Being the fearless soul that he was, he unlocked the door and swung it open, expecting to see a bear or maybe even a person staying there. It was neither. What he saw that night still had him shaken when he told me the story some 50 years later. He said that as the door opened, he saw an extremely large humanoid standing there. It was about 6 feet 5 inches tall and slightly hunched over under the covered porch. Its arms were long, with its hands reaching well past its bent knees, the knees bent in the opposite direction of a human's knees. He said it was covered in thick, dense black hair. It had a smell like a mixture of wet dog and raw sewage. Ooh. Almost reminds me of basically other accounts of Bigfoot, folks, where they smell very bad as well. But raw sewage? Okay, that does sound, right. Maybe this creature was some man exposed to some sort of toxic waste or something, and this is what turned it into this? Perhaps. It's just an idea there, folks, but I kind of doubt it. But let's get back to this guy's story now. But the face, or rather the head, was what stopped him cold. He said it looked like a German shepherd's head had been placed on a large, hairy, human-shaped body. As he looked at it, the thing cocked its head sideways and looked back down at him. Its eyes showed fear and confusion. He told me he raised his gun, and before his finger could pull the trigger, the creature took off, but he still managed to fire a warning shot, hitting it in the right calf muscle. He said the howl that came out of it after he shot it, scared him more than anything in his life ever had. He ran back inside and bolted the door closed. I imagine most people would, folks. I'm not ashamed to say that I would probably do the same thing here as old Granddad, because undoubtedly this creature, for whatever reason, came to the door. Maybe it wanted help, but then again, it didn't say anything, and he said that basically it looked scared. It sounded like this thing just walked up and just was surprised that there was a man there. As I said, this is a very, very, interesting story. But I said that basically at the beginning, didn't I? Let's hear what the, other last parts of it has to say. Either way, he stood there listening as its cries and howls faded away deeper and deeper into the mountains until he could not hear it anymore. Only then did he move away from the door and go back to bed. He swore to me on all things he had held dear that the creature still showed up sometimes after that, dragging its wooden leg across his porch as it came up to the door, but it never bothered anything again. He said it would come up to the door, sniff around, growl softly, and then take off again. He told me there are many things in the woods that can hurt you, whether beast or plant, and many more things that can scare you, but the thing he saw that night was the scariest of them all. He told me I had best never go looking for it, because if it I came across it, I would regret it badly. I imagine the grandson would regret, folks, and the grandfather, was right to tell him that. But let's finally finish off this story. My grandfather has been gone for about 15 years now, and I still believe every word he told me that day. Does that prove the existence of such a creature? Maybe not. The words of an old war veteran will not be enough to change some people's minds, but to me, it is the realest story I've ever heard about the creature. I hope someday someone can actually get documented proof of it, if only to prove what my grandfather went through and what he saw that night. Anyway, folks, a very out there story. Both stories, in fact, are very insane. But we're now at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics that are bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you hit the part of the bell that give you all future notifications. And please, share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video, so be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon.